Welcome back, everybody. I'm really pleased today to have one of the real most important leaders of the shared services movement in the federal government over the last number of years, Beth Angerman. Many of you know Beth from her previous roles in government at the Department of Treasury and the General Services Administration, where she really was one of the leaders of what we know today as the financial management line of business, and what is now coming into the marketplace as through the Financial Management Quality Service Management Office, and as head of the Office of Shared Solutions and Performance Improvement at the General Services Administration, one of the most visible and important leaders in our community. So, Beth, it's really great to have you back to catch up with you, because it's been a long time since we've crossed paths. So great to see you and have you share your reflections on the progress of shared services since the eGov Act. If you begin by bring us up to date and remind us kind of where you were in different parts of your career during the early stages implementation through the present day of the eGov Acts and shared services implementation, and tell us about your new role in your company.
Well, John, I just want to thank you for the chance to start the conversation again and to have a little bit of a reflection on the great progress that's been made. It's been a hard 2 years to be away from everyone, so it's really great to see you. So yeah, Beth Angerman, I served in the government for more than 15 years. When I was in the Treasury Department, I was leading the Treasury Department of Financial Innovation and Transformation Office. And that is when I found my passion around shared services and the eGov Act and all of the goodness that act intended. I spent a lot of time working in the financial management space across the agencies, working with CFOs to standardize processes, to think about a future for financial management technology and what that needed to look like as the world was changing and technology was changing. And frankly, financial management was also modernizing. And then I moved to GSA, as you said, where I was the founder of the Unified Shared Service Management Organization, or what we called USSM for a while, where we worked really closely with agency leaders and OMB across more than just financial management, but across a lot of the mission support functions to really create a little bit of a unified vision for how were we going to operate mission support functions more strategically in a more consolidated, consistent way, with the intention of being able to support mission that much more effectively. And so and then I actually left government to take a quick break to see the other side, a little on the consulting and the contractor perspective. And I was at Slalom for 2.5 years, but I'm excited to announce that I've actually joined Metaphase Consulting, where I'm the Chief Operating Officer. I'm responsible for operations and for delivery. And so I get to spend a lot of my days now re-engaging with clients, learning about their challenges, and hopefully helping them move the ball forward.
Yeah, terrific. You'll be doing a great job of that, Beth, because you bring so much experience doing that in a very challenging environment, shared services across the government. I don't think there's any greater challenge than pushing shared services across sometimes a reluctant federal bureaucracy, but you made a real impact in your years there. So, well, let's go a little bit more into the transition, Beth, from the Treasury Department, your role there at the head of the FIT office, right? Financial Transformation, and into the startup of USSM. How did that happen? That you obviously were an ideal candidate because you had so much great experience in FM, and that was one of the more mature lines of business at the time. So you were a natural. Tell us about how that worked, and with OMB at that time. I think this was during the Obama administration, and it was not long after Dave Nader had come into the position of the controller and became the shared services policy officer. And tell us a little bit more about the origins of the stand-up of USSM.
Well, I give Mr. Nader all the credit because as he and I worked so closely together while I was at Treasury, and we worked with the leadership of Treasury and Fiscal Service and all of the agencies, I think what we all started to feel was a little bit of urgency around, hey, we're having this conversation in financial management, but financial management isn't a stovepipe. Financial management touches all of these other mission support functions. And in order for this to work well, frankly, all the other areas also have to work well. And they at the time were still kind of operating in a very stovepiped way. And so at that point, it was an important initiative for the Obama administration to continue to prioritize efficiency in government and efficiency in management. And it was, I think, also a passion of Dave's to say, let's do something big. Let's leave something that we can actually say is going to continue to focus on how to, over the years, identify the opportunities to not only consolidate where we can, but also identify the services that were in government that could be leveraged by other agencies or by other parts of departments so that we could continue to see progress. And there was not, at that point, there was not really an office that was dedicated for just looking at those mission support functions and what those for the future of those functions would be. And that was the origin of USSM. It tied to the president's management agenda. It tied to a lot of the priorities of the administration. And I will say that I believe that good management doesn't have to be political. And I experienced that because the USSM and OSPI and the office that we eventually ended up creating continued as Dave left and the Trump administration came in, and we continued to make really good progress in identifying ways for the government to work together within those different mission support areas, how to set leadership in those areas that would be thinking about marketplace creation, that would be thinking about standard creation, talking to agencies about what they actually needed, how their current infrastructure was set up, and where it made sense for different parts of their infrastructure or their processes to be considering different new modern options. And so the progress that we made with the quality service management offices and the integrated business framework and the standards, I believe set the foundation for all of the progress that you're seeing today that I'm so proud to watch from afar and see how the grants QSMO and the financial QSMO and the HR QSMO and the cybersecurity QSMO are all continuing to really move that forward.
Yeah, they really are. Tell us about how you might see the origins of some of this, tracing back to the eGov Act. Was that a conscious thing that you were looking for legislative drivers to legitimize some of the efforts to ground some of the efforts that you were working in, or were there other pieces of legislation, or are we working more within the OMB policy and regulatory infrastructure as you move forward and we're looking to kind of justify the actions you were taking?
It's never harmful to have legislation that says it sets a direction and makes it clear what priorities we should have and where we should be focused. And so it was whenever it became the conversation around why are we doing this and how do we prioritize this, it was always helpful to be able to say the eGov Act is there, and the eGov Act, with the creation of the lines of business and some of the other initiatives that they set forward in terms of identifying some of the shared services early on, I think really grounds everyone in that there's goodness there. There's goodness there still today, and that we're still continuing to operate around the premise that act really put in place.
No, that's great. And I've heard you use the metaphor, and I've heard Dave Mader and others use a similar metaphor that it's a relay race, and it's been going on for a long time. And each generation of leaders kind of passes the baton to the next, and hopefully we have alignment, and it's moving in a pretty consistent direction. And I think, but as you're right, as you described, the eGov Act provided some grounding for a lot of this that allowed the lines of business to evolve into what they became in the Obama administration under Dave Mader's leadership, principally at OMB, and then into the Trump administration with Suzette Kent and Margaret Weichert and other leaders there. And you were right in the middle of that as a key implementer. And tell us a little bit more about some of the policy and governance that you put in place, Beth. We had the playbook, and we had lots of governance pieces that were absent and were very, very foundational to creating the policy infrastructure we needed to move forward.
So the Shared Service Governance Board, I think was really instrumental at starting to get all of the agencies to pay attention to not only the idea of shared services as an option for them, but the idea that the governance board representative from every agency needed to be at a deputy secretary or a head of administration level, because what we were talking about now was not just a line of business, but we were talking about all of them and how they all work together and what that collective vision needed to be. And having those folks be at the table, I believe changed the game, because now we had the stakeholders speaking to all the different parts of the organizations that they were responsible for, helping us to identify the right priorities, helping to say when it wasn't and shouldn't be a priority, and explaining why, and starting to align the support in a way that wasn't the hammer of you must do this, but was more of the please come and please help us shape what this needs to be to help you be successful. So I thought the Shared Service Governance Board was kind of I don't know, one of the flagship things we needed to do to ground and to really make sure that this would continue to thrive over the course of the next few decades. I would say the second thing is the standards, which no one ever is excited about. And I swear every time I talk about it, that people's eyes glaze over. But the importance of the conversation that the lines of business leaders have been having around creating standard processes and outcomes and data definitions, that was one of the big reasons everyone always said we can't go to shared services, everything's different. And it was like, well, we need to make sure that we can identify what we can standardize and what we can agree upon and what outcomes that we're looking for, so that we can open up the art of the possibility around what technology we could introduce, or around where new processes or things that some agencies were learning could help other agencies as they were also tackling the same kinds of challenges. And that creation of the FIBF as that the cornerstone of how we would be able to create the marketplaces, how we would be able to have standard acquisition strategies, all of that really became an important success and milestone to set us up for success in the future as well.
Yeah, it sure has been. Tell me about how did the interactions go with agencies, Beth, when you were rolling out some of these new policies and guidelines? And I'm sure had some who are more enthusiastic about embracing shared services than others. And what makes it so hard to implement in some agencies that may seem resistant? Is it selling the value proposition? Is it communication, or is it other things?
Oh, well, it's all of those things. But I think the thing that maybe the benefit of hindsight now, when I think back, we always talked about how government was resistant to change. And I don't know if that was actually one of the leading reasons or not, because in hindsight, I think these agencies are dealing with people on the Hill, at OMB, within their own agencies, with GSA. All these different places are throwing new initiatives at the agencies almost every day. And either it's legislation, or it's a memo, or it's the PMA, and all of it is good, right? All of it is the well-intended priorities. But if you're an agency and you're thinking, I'm still working on doing my day job, and by the way, half of those things aren't funded. So how do we actually start to move forward? And I can understand now some of the fatigue that agencies probably feel when we're giving them this laundry list of things to do, all again, because we're looking for positive outcomes for the customers and the taxpayers. And I get that. But I also think that sometimes when everything is a priority, nothing actually is. And maybe they feel that way a lot. And I credit some of the challenges that we had to there being so much on agencies' plates that it becomes very hard to prioritize, especially some of the really big things that we were talking about.
Sure. Well, Beth, what stands out in your mind as the most important lessons learned, and what's the unfinished business in your perspective, from your perspective, that the next administration should try to tackle to fulfill the vision of the eGov Act and fulfill the possibilities for shared services?
I would say that in addition to the one I just mentioned, my biggest lesson learned was shooting for the moon and landing somewhere close is actually okay. And that's success. And I think that the eGov Act set almost a recipe for big thinking ideas, things we needed to do to set the course. And we've made incremental progress along the way. And sometimes it was super important to people, and sometimes it was not. And sometimes we had a lot of momentum for certain efforts, and sometimes we did not. But if you think about it, it's been 2 decades, and we've continued on the path of pursuing more efficient government. And so don't always get exactly what you think you're going to get or exactly what you want. But as long as you're still continuing to move the ball forward, and there are so many examples of that, right? And not only the more recent things, but all the way back to payroll consolidation, right? Or to when Treasury implemented HUD's financial system, recently with the partnership between OPM and Treasury, and all of the good things that the current shared service providers continue to do. I mean, I have to say, I still define that as we're continuing to celebrate wins every single day. And I would say for advice or what work is left to be done, this is never going to be stick a flag in the ground and we're finished. Because if we're doing it right, we've created processes and infrastructure that we are constantly reevaluating whether or not we're meeting our own efficiency expectations. And there's always going to be more work to do. But I think continuing to support the work that's already been done and the infrastructure that's in place to allow that to happen will avoid the thing that we don't want to do, which is starting all over again. And that, I think, would definitely be the dangerous path. I think there's so much progress has been made that we just need to continue to leverage it and go forward.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And if you could whisper in the ear of the DDM, I don't know if you know Jason Miller personally, but you certainly knew past DDMs and had good access to them, as well as I should add Emily Murphy, when she was a very strong advocate of shared services as the GSA administrator in the last administration. But so you had the ear of one of these very powerful officials. What would you tell them would be, 1 or 2 things they could do if we really wanted to accelerate shared services? Would it be provide more funding? Would it be provide more carrots and sticks? Or what kinds of what would you suggest, Beth?
I would say it's funding. It sounds very tactical and not inspirational, and I get that, but I do think that these initiatives we're talking about, implementing new systems or fundamentally changing processes that have tentacles into these huge organizations, which, by the way, are bigger than most Fortune 500 companies. It's in considerable effort, and you just can't do it for free. And the investment is going to pay off. But if you don't make the investment, you also face a pretty big risk at the legacy, introducing too much risk to your mission. And so I do think that funding is critical to being able to continue to move all of these initiatives forward.
And what do you think it would take to get the funding? Would it take a better business case? Would it take just a higher priority to government modernization? Would it take more burning platforms? What do you think could finally make the money available? I sure
hope it's not more burning platforms. I do. I don't know if that actually wouldn't help a little. But I actually think it's prioritization. I think it's not saying we're going to do everything. And I think it's picking a few things that we can make a strong business case for and starting there. And while you're still continuing to lay the groundwork and the path for success for everything else, but I think picking a few things and starting and celebrating and getting some wins will allow us to continue to make business cases for what we want to do next.
Yeah, agreed. And you did have several big wins under your belt when you were at Treasury and at GSA in your roles, Beth. What stands out as your 2 or 3 most important, most satisfying accomplishments? You mentioned the successful migration of HUD to Treasury. That was a big one, and that happened on your watch. Is that one of them? What were maybe a couple others?
Yes, I was really proud of that one, and major shout out to Fiscal Service and ARC for that and for the leadership at HUD for just working through the change management challenges there and getting that done. I think that's a huge one. I think I've mentioned all the things I'm proud of, right? I love what the government's doing with everything that we put in place as a team. I think the thing that, like, when I look back, the idea that we had an idea and we knew the government needed some coordination, if you will, across the mission support areas and bringing together that governance that we talked about. And that I created that organization, USSM, through the generosity of agencies who contributed people and money to get that off the ground, and that we've been able to leave the legacy that we have. I will say, like, I'm pretty proud of that. And I'm pretty proud of the team that I pulled together to make that happen.
Yeah, those are, you certainly did. A lot of tremendous progress and great team playing on your watch, Beth. And it's just been a real pleasure catching up with you today. You are one of the most passionate and most effective leaders we've had in the shared services community that I can remember, looking and working this community for 20 or more years. It's been just great to catch up with you, and I hope now in your new role with your new company, you'll be back in our community a little bit more actively. You've been kind of laying low, and at least not quite. We haven't seen quite as much of you in SSLC activities, but we want to see you, and we hope that'll be that will happen, and we'll have more opportunities in the future to have conversations like this. So great being with you today, Beth.
I promise you'll see me again soon, John. I'm happy to be back in the conversation, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
We appreciate yours, Beth. Thanks so much for your service through the years, and all the best wishes for continued success in the private sector.
Take care, John.
You too, Beth. Take care.